How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the presidential race. There's not a lot there. The media obsession over this Trump trial is just stupid. Did he sleep? Did he close his eyes? What did he do? Did he say anything? What was his reaction? What was his facial expression? What about the jury? What about the jury? It's all so it's all so soap opera like, and all it does is, honestly, I think it helps Trump. People want to be entertained. He's entertaining. Here's your entertainment. But I've got to note something. The polls have shifted pretty rapidly towards Joe Biden. In fact, the polling right now suggests that Donald Trump has only a 0.2% lead. Had been much higher. It had been a 2.3% lead just a few weeks ago. Now it's neck and neck, and some new polling has now come out in the last couple of days that actually has a shift. The echelon polling has Biden up. The latest morning consult poll, not yet in the Real Clear Politics average, has him up. But the New York Times Siena poll has Trump up 1, and the New York Times Siena poll was the best poll in 2022 and in 2020. And there are many of you saying the polls don't matter. The polls are wrong. But here's the thing. The trend lines, you should pay attention to the trend lines. So now a lot of people who said the polls don't matter, the polls were wrong, the polls are nonsense, are now saying, well, the polls are rigged because how is Joe Biden suddenly ahead? I was telling you months ago that the polling that the Democrats need to keep their eye on is the polling that shows an improved view of the Trump administration time in office. More people today have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump's administration than people had when he left office. So warning sign for the Democrats. The warning sign for the Republicans, and this is the one coming into play right now. The warning sign for Republicans is that among all American voters, about 45% of them were convinced. You could not convince them otherwise. They were convinced there was no way at all the Republicans would ever nominate Donald Trump again. Despite what was happening, despite polling, they were the ones saying the polls wrong. There's no way Republicans would do this. Well, Republicans did it. And now those voters are having to decide, oh my gosh, they really did it. I didn't think they would. What are we going to do? And that's causing a polling shift to Joe Biden. But it's not a lot. And I think it's very notable that the New York Times Siena poll has now moved to likely voter polling. Likely voter polling is people who are likely to vote because they have a propensity to vote based on their prior voting record. Those polls are more accurate than registered voter polls. And the New York Times Siena was the most accurate, and it has Donald Trump ahead, maybe by 1, only in a margin of error. But that's a national poll, and if it's in a national poll, Donald Trump's ahead. In the swing state polling, he's probably doing even better. Here's Harry Itten on CNN talking about the polling data.
Right, you talk about Biden, you talk about, people think the Democrats, and you're going to have it's about diversity in the base. So that is a fascinating point you say about white voters, but it's not all you're noticing. Where else are you seeing gains that may surprise people for Biden?
Yeah, if we've been talking about nationally that Joe Biden's been struggling among voters of color, Hispanic voters in particular, and you look at the aggregate of polls, what we're seeing there is we are seeing gains for Joe Biden. So if you go back to February, Trump was actually leading amongst Hispanic voters by a point. Now Joe Biden's ahead. He's only ahead by 9 points. That's significantly worse than he did back in 2020. But the fact is Joe Biden is gaining among Hispanic voters, and that is a big reason why in the average of national polls, Donald Trump was ahead 2 months ago, and now we're looking at a tied race nationally.
And the things we just heard Arlette highlighting, when Biden saying go for your Social Security and health care, and, it's part of a push Biden's been making towards middle-class voters that he thinks will work. Is it?
No, I don't, at least not at this particular point. If you ask voters who they think is better to represent the middle class, you go back to 2020, Joe Biden led on that metric against Donald Trump by a pretty clear margin. It was 7 points back in 2020. You look at the polling. Now look at the 2024 polling. Who is better for the middle class? Donald Trump leads by 9 percentage points. This, to me, more than anything else, sort of encapsulates the problem that Joe Biden is facing. A lot of voters are looking back on the economy back during the Trump administration.
So that's a 16-point swing, just to be clear, right?
That is a 16-point swing. It's a very large swing. It's one of the largest swings that we've seen across the polling data. I think it's a big reason why Donald Trump at this point is in a much better position than he was in the 2020 polling.
Joe Biden has problems with the middle class. Now, here's the thing. The polling may have shown somewhat of a shift towards Biden among Hispanic voters, but Donald Trump doesn't have to win a majority of the Hispanic vote. He only needs to win a minority of the Hispanic vote. If he wins a minority, he's ahead with white voters. Donald Trump is. If he improves his lead with black voters by 10%, which the polling says is possible, if he improves his standing with Hispanic voters by about 15%, Donald Trump's going to win. He may lose the national popular vote again, but win the Electoral College. And he has some Electoral College advantages. In fact, the data is there for everyone to see, and the New York Times is beginning to sound the alarm for progressives so they understand what is at stake, that Donald Trump has a hidden advantage in the Electoral College in a way that benefits him. This is from Doug Sosnick, who is an advisor to Bill Clinton. When polls show the race for president is tightening, Joe Biden still has a narrower and more challenging path to win the election than Donald Trump. The reason is the Electoral College. My analysis of voter history and polling shows a map that currently favors Mr. Trump, even though recent developments in Arizona improve Mr. Biden's chances. The Biden campaign will need to decide this summer which states to contest hardest. Our Electoral College maps below lay out the best scenarios for him and Mr. Trump. 7 states with close results determined who won both the 2020 and 2016 presidential elections, and those same 7 states will most likely play the same battleground role this fall. 3 industrial states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and 4 Sun Belt states, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. I don't know that you add Georgia and North Carolina to the Sun Belt, but nonetheless. Anyway, Mr. Biden's declining popularity in the Sun Belt states is the main reason Mr. Trump has an edge right now. He's especially struggling with young and non-white voters there. Let's take a closer look. According to 2020 exits, Mr. Biden won 65% of Latino voters, who comprised roughly a fifth of voters in Arizona and Nevada. Mr. Biden won 87% of black voters, who made up 29% in Georgia and 23% in North Carolina. He also won 60% of voters aged 18 to 29. Now look at this year. The Siena College poll released last weekend showed Mr. Biden's support had dropped 18 points with black voters, 15 points with Latinos, and 14 points with younger voters nationally. Abortion could be a decisive issue in Mr. Biden, stemming this erosion in Nevada and Arizona. Nevertheless, the key to Mr. Biden's victory is to perform well in the 3 industrial states. If Mr. Trump is able to win over one or more of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Mr. Biden's path to 270 Electoral College votes becomes narrower. Based on past voting, Mr. Trump will start out the general election with 219 Electoral College votes compared to 226 votes for Mr. Biden, with 93 votes up for grabs. Voter history shows Trump is in a strong position in North Carolina. Trump would have 235 Electoral College votes with North Carolina, which he's going to win. Georgia, Biden won by less than 12,000 votes. If Georgia and North Carolina both go, Trump has 251 Electoral College votes. I think because of Lake and Riley, Donald Trump's going to win. And if he gets North Carolina and Georgia, all he needs is Pennsylvania. He gets 270 electoral college votes right there. If he gets Michigan, he gets Nevada, he crosses the finish line as well. It's a problem for Joe Biden in the map. Joe Biden got a real serious burden. And the problem for Joe Biden is that everybody kind of understands the stuff with Donald Trump. All the Donald Trump stuff is baked in. The trials are baked in. With Biden, what happens if inflation spikes again? What happens if interest rates go up instead of going down? What happens if there's a terrorist attack? What happens if there's an expanded war? What happens if there's a recession? Most of the unknowns work against Joe Biden. Very few of the unknowns work against Donald Trump. Sure, what if Donald Trump is convicted in New York? I think most Americans view it as a show trial. Only a third of Americans are deeply concerned about it. 2/3 of Americans couldn't care less. They view it as a witch hunt. Accurately so. So what happens? The variables there benefit Donald Trump so much more than Joe Biden. If I had to call it today, be real honest with you, if I had to call it today, I expect Joe Biden to win. It's not to say that Trump can't win. I think there are good odds for Trump. But incumbency has an advantage. And I do think that we shouldn't be dismissive of incumbency and money for Joe Biden. Donald Trump's voters have a higher propensity to forget to vote or to not show up to vote, or to vote just on election day. And if the weather's bad, they don't show up. That gives Joe Biden an inherent advantage. It's not an endorsement of Joe Biden. It's a reality here that when Donald Trump's coalition is of people who are less likely to regularly vote, Donald Trump needs more money to remind them to vote and get them out to vote, and he has less money. So he's got to overcome that money to be able to get these people to turn out to vote. He needs to turn them out early. He needs to turn them out by absentee. He needs them to not wait for election day. And Trump continues to tell people, wait for election day. If the weather's bad, they're not going to show up. You got to bank those votes early. But that takes money. It takes time and energy. And Biden's got more volunteers on the ground in these swing states with more money behind them to be able to do it. So it gives Joe Biden an advantage. And incumbency has an advantage. So I for one, won't be surprised if Joe Biden wins in November. But I also won't be surprised if Donald Trump wins in November. Now, that's not playing both sides. Here's the reality. Joe Biden has alienated himself from the middle class. Joe Biden has alienated himself from working class Hispanic voters. Joe Biden has alienated himself from young black men. Joe Biden has alienated himself economically from suburban parents worried about their 401ks and their kids having to compete against boys and girls sports. Joe Biden has alienated himself from a lot of people. They still blame him for the economy. They blame him for inflation. They don't like Bidenomics. So if there's a voter revolt in November, it's going to work against Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. It's going to be a very narrow race that comes down to about 50,000 voters nationwide in about these 6 or 7 swing states. Anyone who says one guy is sure to win or the other guy is sure to win, they're wrong. 50,000 voters are going to decide this race. Is going to be a low turnout election because most Americans hate them both. Joe Biden has incumbency and has money. Donald Trump has policy and passion. Can incumbency and money trump politics and policy and passion? You bet. You bet. You have all the passion in the world for someone, but if you forget to show up and vote, they don't get elected. But policy and passion is what people want. And if they do turn out and Trump is able to fund the ground game, Joe Biden's in trouble. And do you know why I wouldn't be surprised? Look, I do think if you put a gun to my head and said you got to choose your prediction of who wins, my prediction right now actually is Biden, even in the polling, just because of incumbency and money. His ground game is good in these swing states, and that gives him an advantage when Trump still tells people to vote early. But, you got to hear me on this. You got to hear me on this. The reason I think Donald Trump can win this thing, and the reason I would not be surprised that Donald Trump won in November, even as I think incumbency money give Biden an advantage, the reason I wouldn't be surprised is this, the dirty little secret of this campaign season. Democrats are so convinced that Donald Trump cannot win that makes it more likely that he does win. Because when you're so convinced that that one thing cannot happen, you let your guard down because you're presuming that because I would never vote for him and none of my friends would ever vote for him, no one would ever vote for him. And that's what President Hillary Clinton thought as well. Hello there, it is Eric Erickson here. Let me see if I can squeeze a phone call here. 877-973-7425. Michael, I'm not trying to squeeze you, just trying to squeeze your phone call in. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Great.
I had heard you, I think it was last week, that you read something about that the judge in the New York City trial that he had a conflict of interest if a family member of his profited from the trial. I may be getting that kind of wrong, but I think that's what you said. Has anyone of Trump's lawyers tried this?
No, okay, so that wasn't me saying that. I forget who said it. No, there were claims, though, and the Trump team made claims about some sort of interest with the judge's kid exposing it, but it turned out that the person wasn't actually the judge's kid, and it became such a thing it really thoroughly made the judge mad. Okay. Yeah, it was, that was it. In fact, it was Trump himself who made the claim, but it turned out that the person was the and I got to just say, as an aside, I'm glad you raised this issue because I should have mentioned last week when it happened. What a boneheaded thing to do. You're about to go to court in a criminal trial before a judge who might already be predisposed against you. You attack the judge's kid, and it turns out not to be the judge's kid. You're doing yourself no favors with the judge. It's no wonder the judge has been hostile to Trump, because you can say the guy was out to get Trump anyway. Well, maybe he was, but Trump gave him every reason to it. He tried to attack the judge's kid, and it turned out not to be the judge's kid. It was just a boneheaded thing to do. Gosh, I feel so bad for Trump's lawyers. I really do. My goodness gracious. Making life difficult for himself and for his lawyers. But he does have really good lawyers, and that's something you do need to know in this, is Trump's got good lawyers on this case. And that matters greatly, having good lawyers. 877-973-7425 is the phone number, should you wish to be on the program. Do not forget, text ERIC, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777 to get show notes, live links, all that stuff. Right now, I got to tell you, if you go to ericforhillsdale.com, you put in your email address, you can put in your address, and you can get Imprimis delivered in your mailbox every month. I have subscribed since I was in law school in the early 2000s. I became a subscriber of Imprimis because I was starting to think about conservative political philosophy and conservative thought and ideas. Was reading National Review, and a buddy of mine recommended Imprimis after we'd gone to a Young America Foundation event, and I started to subscribe. And my goodness, it is the thought leaders of the conservative movement in your inbox every month, completely free. You do not pay a penny. You go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. You get the leading thinkers of the conservative movement, Heather McDonald, Larry Arnn, Chris Rufo, Victor Davis Hanson, so many more. They arrive in your mailbox completely for free every single month. Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Go to the website, put in your address. They'll start mailing it to you. You can thank me later. It is so good. Such great intellectual thought, really stimulating learning from Hillsdale College, part of their education mission. I will be broadcasting from Orlando, Florida tomorrow as we continue the tour of stations. We'll be heading around the country throughout the year. This is going to be a year of travel in the election season, going to stations, doing events, fun times around. As always, if you text ERIC, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, all that fine stuff. Follow me around social media. Those of you in Jacksonville who turned out last night at Aroma's, the Cigar Bar, fantastic event. Pints and Politics tomorrow in Orlando is going to be a fun event. Again, we'll be doing these kind of the Ask Me Anything events we do with listeners around the country where every question is up for grabs and on the record. I'll tell you what I think, give you my honest opinion, whatever you disagree or not. But the kind words from so many people last night were really encouraging to me, so thank you. Now, I want to go to Pierce's phone call. He's been waiting patiently. Pierce, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show.
Hey, Eric, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
On the, we've got a problem with the post office, and I'm not sure if it's just a regional problem or if it's nationwide with the mail delivery. being really slow. How's that going to affect absentee balloting? And will that be advantageous to the Republicans?
Well, okay. So that is such a great question. Here's the issue. In most states, and I actually think in every state, no, not every state, but most states, if your mail is stamped and post office marked on election day, they count your ballot. There are some states where the ballot's got to be back by election day. Most states has to be stamped by the post office, and there's a grace period of about a week or so to get these in where they still count them. So that's not the issue is getting them to you in a timely manner. And this gets back to why I tell people, whether it's not an endorsement, it's not that I like him, it's just the reality why I think Biden has a latent advantage in the election in November is because his team is working very, very hard in the swing states to make sure that they've got an early ballot ground game where they're showing up at people's houses, making sure they fill out the form, getting the form in the mail, helping people get the ballots. And the GOP doesn't have any. The GOP should have something like that. They used to have stuff like that, but over the last number of years, they've gotten suspicious about it and they don't do it to their detriment. If the GOP can fire it up, I think they can pull it off.
I think so too. And I want to, can I just throw something out here on the Trump trial real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think you made the comment, Michael Cohen is the prosecution's star witness. Can Trump's lawyers subpoena the commissioner of the FEC who investigated the transaction with Stormy Daniels and found there wasn't a violation, and the DOJ who investigated that and said there was no violation? Would that be a part of their defense to create or show that there was nothing wrong?
Yeah, I think it's got to be. I mean, just and it's okay. Let me back this up for people who weren't listening like Pierce was. Y'all should be listening like Pierce. What Alvin Bragg is trying to claim is that Donald Trump committed a state felony in New York by covering up a federal felony. And the federal felony is a campaign finance violation. And the problem is that neither the FEC nor the Department of Justice chose to treat it as such. And in fact, the FEC dismissed the claim that it was a felony and threw it out and never prosecuted him. And so it's hard to say he committed a felony in New York because he was trying to cover up a federal felony when no federal prosecutor ever said it was a felony and, in fact, dismissed it. It's all of that, I think, is deeply relevant to the transaction. And I got to tell you, Pierce, as well, as a lawyer who ran campaigns for a living through my law firm, many of my clients would pay me for my services and attribute them to me as a lawyer. And then I, with money, was also a guy who could place ads and do other things. Now, I was pretty good about disclosing it and itemizing it for them so they could put it in their transactions in their disclosure reports. But I know law firms who run a lot of political expenditures through them, and it's all listed as legal expenses, and they don't break it out. Well, it was legal expenses, reimbursement for putting a TV ad on or a mail piece. They just say legal expenses. That happens. It is routine. It is common. The FEC lets it slide. There's not a federal crime here, and that's the fatal flaw in Alvin Bragg's case.
And and did I not hear? I believe I heard that there's 2 lawyers who've been seated as jurors.
Yes, there are. Now,
and
I mean,
that kind of wouldn't that be advantageous to Trump?
Listen, I mean, unless they're progressive lawyers who are there to settle a grudge against him, yes, because they would be the ones to understand that you can't prosecute Donald Trump under the state law that they're prosecuting him under if there wasn't an underlying felony. And the fact that the underlying felony is supposedly a campaign finance violation for which only the feds can prosecute, that would raise all sorts of problems in my mind if I were a lawyer on a jury that this doesn't add up.
Yeah, and that would create reasonable doubt.
Yes.
He could actually come out acquitted, and I think that would give him a great bounce in the polls. Oh,
I think it will, too. I think the Democrats will play. Look, a hung jury or an acquittal, I think, helps Donald Trump tremendously. And a hung jury, I think, would be ironic because it's kind of where we are as a nation, a 50-50 split on whether you like him or not. But I think it helps him with most voters. It makes him look persecuted. And frankly, I would use the word persecution here. People are saying, well, who cares about the underlying merits? He deserves it. He gets what he deserves. Chicken's coming to Bruce. Yes, but that's not how justice in this country is supposed to work.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yep. Pierce,
I like that.
great talking to you. Thanks for the phone call. 877-973-7425. And again, if you weren't here yesterday, if you weren't listening, let me. I don't want to overwhelm you with legal jargon. This actually, literally, election law was what I specialized in as a lawyer. I was one of 5 lawyers in the state of Georgia at the time who had a regular campaign finance practice. And the federal government makes very clear in the statutes for campaign finance that only the federal government can prosecute campaign finance crimes. The government refused to prosecute these campaign finance crimes, deciding there were no crimes. So the state of New York's, the district attorney trying to claim there was a federal crime that the federal government refused to prosecute, it kind of doesn't hold water, because first he's got to be able to essentially convince everyone that there was a crime, but the feds said there was no crime and they didn't prosecute him on it. So how then can he do this? The only reason that Alvin Bragg is choosing to go this route is because the statute of limitations has otherwise expired. See, the New York crime that Donald Trump was charged with is essentially documentary fraud, that he claimed a transaction in accounting documentation was legal fees when it was really paying a past debt, paying off Stormy Daniels. The statute of limitations is 2 years. It's a misdemeanor. But it becomes like a 7-year statute of limitations if you can say he did it to cover up a crime. And it becomes a felony, not a misdemeanor. So he's saying it was done, this saying that it was for legal services when it was really to pay off debt, that it was to cover up the underlying crime. The underlying crime was a campaign finance violation. That's how he's chosen to get Trump. The prior New York district attorney rejected the legal argument. The U.S. attorney in New York rejected the legal argument. The actual New York district attorney's staff who put together the case against Donald Trump rejected the legal argument, and some of them resigned when Alvin Bragg decided to pursue the case this way. This case doesn't hold water. It is designed to get payback because Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton and refuses to go away. For all of the media, for all the progressives who insist it's to stop a would-be autocrat, Donald Trump failed. He lost the election. January 6th didn't work out for him. He's lost all the cases since. Now all these Democrats, they're just helping him. Honestly, members of the media have no humility. Members of the media cannot admit they were wrong. They cannot admit they have a problem. But the press corps is in a sick, symbiotic codependency with Donald Trump. They need Donald Trump. Donald Trump is good for the media's ratings. Donald Trump draws eyeballs. He creates passion and polarization in a way that helps the media. It gives them ratings. It gives them something to talk about. It gives them reality TV. It gives them everything they think they need for ratings, and they are obsessed with it. And it gives the left what they want to hear. Here's the New York Times writer Mara Gay on Morning Joe telling the crowd what they want to hear.
I do agree with George. I think that his PR capabilities are going to be somewhat limited in New York City, or maybe it was John that mentioned that a moment ago. That's absolutely true. It's an ongoing concern because essentially he's like a caged animal, and that's a dangerous situation. He's feeling very threatened. He's out of control, and so we do expect him to lash out. Anybody who has covered him over the past decade can expect that.
Oh, it's a caged animal. He's lashed out. I mean, they're giving the MSNBC viewers exactly what they want. And in some states, Pornhub is blocked. If you try to get on Pornhub in some states now, states like Virginia, Louisiana, and others, if you were to get on, you'd see, sorry, you're in the state, you can't watch it. And so the people who would be going to Pornhub are instead going to MSNBC, and they're watching MSNBC coverage of Donald Trump, and that's how they're getting their sexual fixation and fixes, is thinking about all these things happening to Donald Trump. It's a level of priapism for the left that they're engaged with in the coverage of Donald Trump. They're obsessed with this stuff. It is pornography for them. It is a sick, sad, symbiotic relationship between Donald Trump and the media and the hardcore left progressive activists who want like this BDSM Donald Trump coverage of the trial. I hate to be that blunt with you about it, but this is moved beyond rational commentary for MSNBC into some sort of quasi-sexual fantasy realm with Donald Trump, where on a play-by-play basis, on a daily basis, they're telling you how broken and beaten down and tired and weary he is, and he's a caged animal now, staring at the camera, and this is what the left, it's what excites them these days, and that is everything you need to know bad and demented about the political left. And MSNBC caters to that these days. MSNBC does this for the left. They claim that Fox News does it for the right, but it is nothing compared to MSNBC when it comes to this sort of stuff. This wall-to-wall, sick, obsessive coverage with, did Donald Trump stare at the camera in court? Did Donald Trump stare at the media? Did Donald Trump blink? Did Donald Trump sleep? Did Donald Trump nod off? Is Donald Trump angry? What did bad orange man daddy do today? This is what they do. It's a demented thing for the political left in the United States. And MSNBC, maybe it's MSNC 17 now. There to cover for the left that can't get access to other pornography in the states they live in. It's what Joy Reid serves these days. She's just that for them. If that makes you gag, well, you probably should. But this is the world we live in. Sad, really. Sad. That's what Joy Reid is. Now, from that awful thought where we're all pouring eye bleach and brain bleach, we must move on. But first, I must tell you about Vision Computers. Vision Computers want you to buy your computer from, listen, if you go out to one of those big box electronic stores and you bought the one-size-fits-all computer and you're having trouble with it, for a low annual fee, Vision Computer can become your IT department. All you do is call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com. And in 15 seconds or less, you get your answer to why your one-size-fits-all big box generic computer isn't doing what you wanted to do, how to get something to do. Vision can even remote in and take care of it for you. Or you can go to Vision, let them build your computer for you. You're going to save money and you're going to get a better machine. And Vision Computers gives you their tech support for free. So you save money with the new computer and you get their tech support for free. And if you don't have it for them, you can get it for a low annual fee. If you're a small business, for $179 a year, not a month, a year, you can get Vision's IT support in 15 seconds or less. Your employees can call them and get the answer to the question, get email support, get printer support, get server support, networking support, whatever you need from Vision Computers. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Give them a call, 404-COMPUTE, or go online, visioncomputers.com. Let Vision Computers be your tech solution for your home or your office. And don't forget, they build really great computers. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson across the United States. I got to play you some of this, just a little bit of this interview. Asna Tabassum is the valedictorian for the University of Southern California. They have canceled her speech because they say it's about safety.
Joining me now is Asna Tabassum, University of Southern California valedictorian. Asna, thank you very much for joining us. My understanding is that this week you met with university officials to address security concerns. What happened in that meeting? Did they tell you about any specific threats?
No, actually, they did not tell me about any specific threats, and my request to ask for the details of such threats were denied. And so it leads me to consider whether the decision to revoke my speech was made on the basis of safety alone.
Do you have a sense of whether there was a concern for your safety or perhaps the safety of other students?
The safety, I think, is a priority for all students, including myself. And so it was made unclear to me because I received no details about what specifically the security threats were directed to.
So the university has said that this is not a free speech issue. Do you view it that way?
I think there's a nuance here. I think, I expressed an opinion through a link that I had on my Instagram. The hate and the vitriol that was unleashed towards me after, I think, was part of the reason that the university caved in. And
Listen, I disagree with her. She's an anti-Semite. She hates Israel. She criticized Israel. She's pro-Hamas. But she busted her butt at USC to be the valedictorian. She deserves to speak. Just because I don't like what she's going to say doesn't mean she shouldn't be able to say it. She should be able to say it. It's her speech. She earned the right, and shame on USC for being cowards, for claiming this is about safety. You know who's scared on the campus of USC? The Jews. The Jews. They're being told to act like you're not Jewish on the campus. They're not going to be the ones causing problems. She deserves the right to speak. University of Southern California should stop being cowards and should stand up for her right to speak and should allow her to speak at graduation. And shame on them for not allowing it. Absolutely shame on them for being cowards and hiding behind safety grounds to avoid letting the valedictorian give the speech the right to do so she has earned through her grades.